In the small coastal town of Millbrook, a 12-year-old girl named Emma Collins sat quietly by the kitchen window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. The old cottage felt cold, not just from the winter chill, but from the emptiness that had filled their home since her parents' tragic accident 2 years ago. Thomas Collins, her grandfather, moved slowly around the kitchen. His weathered hands prepared a simple breakfast of toast and weak tea. Emma noticed how tired he looked, the lines on his face telling stories of hard work and endless struggles. She remembered the days when her parents were alive, their laughter, the warmth, the comfort of a complete family. Money was always tight. Thomas worked odd jobs, fixing local farmers' equipment, helping at the hardware store, doing whatever he could to keep a roof over their heads. Emma watched him carefully, understanding the weight of responsibility that rested on his shoulders. She was a quiet girl, mature beyond her years, carrying a silent strength that belied her young age. At school, Emma tried her best to stay invisible. Her clothes were worn, her shoes slightly too small, but she never complained. The other children sometimes whispered, but she held her head high. Her grandfather had taught her that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but about how you carried yourself. One morning, a letter arrived that changed everything. The town's only factory was closing, and jobs were becoming scarce. Thomas's face grew even more worried as he read the local newspaper. Emma watched him carefully, sensing the tension that filled their small kitchen. "We'll be okay," Thomas would say, his voice trying to sound confident. But Emma could see the worry in his eyes. At night, she would often hear her grandfather talking softly on the phone, trying to find work, trying to make ends meet. Sometimes she would hear him praying, quiet, desperate prayers that seemed to carry the weight of their entire world. School was Emma's escape. She was a brilliant student, top of her class despite their challenges. Her teachers noticed her potential, a bright spark of intelligence that refused to be dimmed by their difficult circumstances. Mrs. Peterson, her favorite teacher, would often give her extra books, seeing the hunger for knowledge in Emma's eyes. The community of Millbrook was small, but tight-knit. People knew each other's stories, understood each other's struggles. The local grocery store owner, Mr. Williams, would sometimes slip an extra loaf of bread into their bag. The baker would save day-old pastries for Thomas. These small acts of kindness were their lifeline. Emma did her part. After school, she would help her grandfather. She learned to mend clothes, to cook simple meals, to stretch their limited resources. Her hands, still young and soft, were learning the hard lessons of survival. She collected aluminum cans to recycle, helped neighbors with small chores, saved every penny she could. Their cottage was small but meticulously clean. Emma would spend hours making sure everything was in its place. The few photographs they had of her parents were carefully dusted, kept in a special place of honor. Her mother's old knitting needles sat in a basket by the window, a memory of gentler times. Winter in Millbrook was harsh. The wind would howl around their small cottage, finding every crack and crevice. Some nights Emma would huddle close to her grandfather, sharing the small warmth they had. They would talk about her parents, about dreams, about hope. "We're survivors," Thomas would tell her. "Collins always find a way." Emma believed him. Despite everything, the poverty, the loss, the constant struggle, she believed in possibility. She saw hope in her grandfather's tired eyes, in the kindness of their small community, in her own determination. As the first snow of the season began to fall outside, Emma looked out the window. The world seemed both beautiful and challenging. She knew their journey would not be easy, but they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. Little did Emma know that this winter would bring a change that would alter their lives forever. A chance, a possibility, a glimmer of hope that would transform their quiet struggle into something extraordinary. The night settled around their small cottage, quiet and mysterious, holding the promise of tomorrow. The community center stood like an old friend at the heart of Millbrook, a weathered building that had seen countless stories unfold within its walls. Emma discovered this place almost by accident, drawn by a handwritten sign looking for volunteers. Mrs. Roberts, a widow in her 70s, noticed Emma first. Her sharp eyes saw more than just a young girl. She saw potential, determination, and a quiet strength. "Come here, child," she called one cold morning, her voice both gentle and commanding. Emma approached hesitantly. Mrs. Roberts sat surrounded by balls of colorful yarn, her wrinkled hands moving quickly with knitting needles. "I need help sorting these donation boxes," she said, not asking but stating a fact that seemed to bind Emma to her request. Days turned into weeks. Emma learned more than just sorting boxes. Mrs. Roberts taught her to knit, her patient fingers guiding Emma's clumsy attempts. "Life is like knitting," she would say. "Sometimes you drop a stitch, sometimes you make mistakes, but you always keep going." The community center became Emma's second home. She helped serve meals to elderly residents, cleaned tables, and listened to countless stories. Mr. Jenkins, a retired fisherman, would tell tales of stormy seas and brave rescues. Margaret, a former schoolteacher, would share wisdom about life and learning. Thomas noticed the change in his granddaughter. Her eyes seemed brighter, her step more confident. She would come home with stories of the people she'd met, the things she'd learned. Sometimes she'd bring home extra food, bread, soup, a pie someone had donated. One particularly challenging day, Emma discovered Mrs. Wilson, an elderly woman who lived alone, hadn't been to the center for days. With Mrs. Roberts' encouragement, she walked to the woman's small house. She found Mrs. Wilson had fallen and couldn't call for help. Emma's quick thinking saved the day. She called for help, stayed with Mrs. Wilson, and made sure she was taken care of. The community rallied around the story of the young girl who had become a hero. Word spread quickly in Millbrook. People began to see Emma differently. She wasn't just the quiet girl from the poor cottage anymore. She was becoming someone special, someone who cared, who helped, who made a difference. The center had strange magic. It wasn't about money or fancy things. It was about connection. Old and young, rich and poor, everyone was welcome. Emma learned that community wasn't about what you had, but about how you treated people. Thomas watched his daughter's transformation with pride. He saw her learning valuable lessons about compassion, about strength, about the power of helping others. Some evenings he would ask her to tell him about her day at the center, listening intently to every detail. Mrs. Roberts became a mentor of sorts. She saw something special in Emma, a spark of resilience that reminded her of herself when she was young. "You have a good heart," she would tell Emma, her eyes twinkling with wisdom and affection. The winter seemed less harsh now. Emma found warmth in the community center, not just physical warmth, but the warmth of belonging. She learned that family wasn't just about blood, it was about connections, about people who cared for each other. Some days were still difficult. Emma would see the struggle in her grandfather's eyes, feel the weight of their financial challenges, but now she had hope. She had learned that challenges could be faced together, that no one was truly alone. The community center became a symbol of something greater. It was a place of hope, of healing, of unexpected connections. Emma was becoming part of something bigger than herself, a community that looked out for each other, that found strength in unity. As the winter continued, Emma's world expanded. She was learning, growing, becoming someone who could make a difference. The quiet girl was slowly transforming into a young woman with purpose, with hope, with a heart big enough to care for others. Mrs. Roberts watched her with a knowing smile. "Some seeds," she would say, looking at Emma, "take time to grow, but when they do, they become something beautiful." And in the heart of Millbrook, something beautiful was indeed taking root. The scholarship announcement arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. Emma found the envelope tucked between bills on their kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. The local education foundation was offering a full scholarship, a chance that seemed almost too good to be true. Thomas had been working extra shifts at the hardware store, his body aching from long hours of manual labor. When Emma showed him the scholarship details, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and worry. "It costs money to apply," he said, his voice careful and measured. Without hesitation, Thomas made a decision that would change everything. His most treasured possession, a complete set of precision mechanics tools he'd collected over 30 years, would be sold. These tools were more than just equipment. They were memories of his life's work, his professional pride. The local pawn, Shop owner, Mr. Peterson, looked uncomfortable when Thomas brought in the tools. He knew what they meant to Thomas. "Are you sure?" he asked. Understanding the weight of the moment, Thomas simply nodded, his hands running over the tools one last time. Emma watched the sacrifice silently. She understood the depth of her grandfather's, loved that he was giving up his most precious possessions to give her a chance at education. That evening she worked on her scholarship application with a determination that burned brighter than ever before. Mrs. Roberts from the community center helped her refine the essay. "Write from your heart," she advised, watching Emma carefully craft each sentence. The essay became more than just an application. It was a story of survival, of family, of hope. Emma wrote about their struggles, about Thomas working multiple jobs, about their small cottage, about the community that had supported them. She wrote about resilience, about finding strength in difficult moments, about the power of never giving up. The night before submission, Thomas read the essay. Tears gathered in his eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming pride. He saw his granddaughter's spirit in every word, the strength of their family captured in her writing. At school, Emma's teachers noticed her intense focus. Mrs. Peterson, who had always believed in her, offered extra help. "You have a real chance," she would tell Emma, providing additional guidance for the scholarship application. The community seemed to hold its breath. Everyone in Millbrook knew about Emma's application. The local cafe, the hardware store, the community center. They all spoke about the young girl with big dreams and an even bigger heart. Days turned into weeks. Emma tried to stay hopeful but realistic. She knew competition would be tough. Students from wealthy families would also be applying, with resources and opportunities she could only dream about. Thomas continued working, his hands rough from labor, his spirit unbroken. He would come home tired, but would always ask about the scholarship, always listening carefully to Emma's updates. The waiting was the hardest part. Emma continued her volunteer work at the community center, continued helping Mrs. Roberts, continued supporting her grandfather. She refused to let uncertainty paralyze her dreams. One crisp morning, an official-looking envelope arrived. Emma's hands shook as she opened it, Thomas standing beside her, his large hand resting gently on her shoulder. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Congratulations," the letter began. Emma had won a full scholarship, not just a partial one, but a complete education funding that would change everything. The selection committee had been moved by her essay, by her story of resilience and hope. The news spread quickly through Millbrook. The community center erupted in celebration. Mrs. Roberts hugged Emma, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Mr. Williams from the grocery store brought a special cake. The entire town seemed to celebrate, as if one of their own had won something far more significant than a scholarship. Thomas said nothing for a long moment. Then he hugged Emma, his strong arms holding her tight. No words were needed. Their sacrifice, their struggle, their hope, everything had led to this moment. A new chapter was beginning. Emma's dreams were no longer just dreams. They were becoming reality. The scholarship committee meeting had been different. Among applications from wealthy families with polished resumes, Emma's raw, honest story stood out. Her essay spoke of struggle, hope, and community, something money couldn't buy. When the announcement came, Millbrook celebrated as if every resident had won. The small town gathered at the community center, bringing homemade dishes and sharing Emma's joy. Mrs. Roberts had organized everything, her experienced hands preparing a special celebration. Mr. Williams from the grocery store brought a massive chocolate cake. The local baker, Mrs. Thompson, added her famous apple pies. People who had watched Emma grow brought small gifts, books, stationery, little tokens of their belief in her potential. Thomas stood quietly in the corner, watching his granddaughter. His hands, rough from years of hard work, trembled slightly. He remembered the days of uncertainty, the nights of worry about Emma's future. Now everything seemed possible. The scholarship wasn't just money. It was a promise of education, of opportunity, of hope. Emma would be the first in their family to go to college. The weight of this achievement sat heavily on her young shoulders. Local businesses began to show support. Mr. Peterson from the hardware store offered Emma a part-time job during college breaks. The community center promised continued support. Mrs. Roberts began teaching her additional skills: budgeting, cooking, life management. Emma's teachers gathered around her, pride shining in their eyes. Mrs. Peterson, who had always believed in her, shared stories of other students who had succeeded against challenging odds. "You're not just winning a scholarship," she told Emma. "You're breaking cycles." The local newspaper ran a story about Emma. "Millbrook's Hope," the headline read. Suddenly, the quiet girl who had been almost invisible became a symbol of possibility for the entire community. Preparations for college began. Thomas worked extra hours to buy Emma a second-hand laptop. Mrs. Roberts helped her shop for essential supplies. The community came together, each person contributing what they could. Some nights Emma would sit with her grandfather, discussing her fears and hopes. Thomas listened carefully, offering quiet wisdom. "Education is a gift," he would say. "Not just for you, but for everyone who believes in you." The college acceptance letter arrived with official scholarship documents. Emma's hands shook as she read through the details. Full tuition, books, and a small living allowance. It was more than they had ever dreamed possible. Local businesses started a small fund to support Emma's additional expenses. The barbershop, the cafe, the hardware store, everyone contributed. It wasn't about the money, but about believing in potential. Mrs. Wilson, the elderly woman Emma had once helped, knitted her a warm blanket for college. "Something to remember home," she said, her hands carefully working each stitch. The blanket became a symbol of community love. Thomas began teaching Emma practical skills: how to manage money, how to cook simple meals, how to take care of herself. Their evenings became precious moments of preparation and connection. The community center became a place of celebration. People would stop Emma, share advice, offer encouragement. She was no longer just a girl from a poor cottage. She was Millbrook's daughter, their collective hope. Some nights Emma would look at her scholarship documents in disbelief. The journey from their small cottage to college seemed impossible, yet here she was, on the edge of a new chapter. Her grandfather's sacrifice, selling his precious tools, had made this possible. Emma promised herself she would make every opportunity count. She would study hard, make him proud, represent their community with honor. The night before leaving, for college, the entire town gathered. It wasn't just a farewell party, but a celebration of possibility. Emma represented every child in Millbrook who had ever dreamed of something more. Thomas watched his granddaughter, tears in his eyes. The quiet girl who had survived loss, poverty, and countless challenges was now ready to change her world, not just for herself, but for everyone who had believed in her. As Emma prepared for her journey, the entire town of Millbrook stood behind her, a testament to the power of community, hope, and unwavering support. The college campus stretched before Emma like a new world. Brick buildings, green lawns, students rushing between classes, everything felt different from Millbrook. Her second-hand suitcase seemed small against the backdrop of grand university buildings. Her first day was a mixture of excitement and terror. Coming from a small town, everything felt overwhelming. Other students seemed confident, dressed in expensive clothes, talking about summer internships and family connections. Emma felt like an outsider. Thomas had given her one piece of advice before leaving. "Remember who you are," he said, his rough hand squeezing her shoulder. "Your worth isn't in fancy clothes or big words. It's in your heart." Her dormitory room was small but clean. One side remained empty, waiting for a roommate. Emma carefully arranged her few belongings: the knitted blanket from Mrs. Wilson, a photograph of her grandfather, some books from the community center. The first week was challenging. Emma discovered that college was more than just studying. It was about navigating social groups, understanding complex systems, finding her place. Some nights she would call Thomas, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I don't know if I belong here," she would say. Thomas would listen carefully, offering quiet encouragement. "You belong everywhere," he would remind her. You've already proven that. Her scholarship came with work-study opportunities. Emma took every chance she could. She worked in the library, helped in the cafeteria, tutored younger students. Each job was a chance to learn, to save money, to prove herself. Mrs. Roberts had prepared her well. The budgeting skills, the cooking lessons, the practical wisdom, everything came into use. While other students struggled with basic life skills, Emma managed confidently. Her academic performance surprised even her professors. The girl from the small town began to shine. Her essays were different, filled with real-life experiences, raw emotion, genuine understanding that went beyond textbook knowledge. Professor Harrison, her English literature instructor, noticed her first. "Your writing tells a story beyond words," he told her after reading her first major assignment. Emma realized her experiences were her strength, not her weakness. Midway through the semester, something changed. Emma started a small support group for first-generation college students. Students who, like her, were navigating a world completely new to them. The group became a lifeline for many. She would often think of Millbrook, of Thomas working extra shifts, of Mrs. Roberts teaching her to knit, of the community center that had been her second home. Their support traveled with her, invisible but powerful. Weekends were for calling home. Thomas would update her about Millbrook. Mrs. Roberts would share community news. Emma would talk about her classes, her experiences, her growing confidence. Her second semester brought new challenges and opportunities. Emma was invited to speak at a student conference about community support and education. Her story of coming from a small town supported by an entire community inspired many. The university offered her a research assistant position. Her practical skills and genuine approach impressed her academic advisors. Emma was no longer just a scholarship student. She was becoming a leader, a voice for those who came from similar backgrounds. During summer, she returned to Millbrook. The town celebrated her achievements like a collective victory. Every person who had supported her felt a sense of pride. Emma wasn't just representing herself, but her entire community. She promised to give back, to create scholarship opportunities for other students from small towns, to show that education wasn't just about individual success, but about lifting entire communities. Thomas watched her transformation with quiet pride. The scared little girl had become a confident young woman. Her experiences had not hardened her, but made her more compassionate, more understanding. As another college year began, Emma understood something profound. Her journey was never just about her. It was about every person in Millbrook who had believed in her. It was about showing that with support, with love, with community, anything was possible. Her story was just beginning, and the best was yet to come.